Hi guys, welcome back to the Pageant project. The open states, well, the states for Miss USA that are doing open call got announced, I believe, about 3 days ago. And I've been asked just in the last week by two of my teenage clients whether I feel they should submit or apply for the open call casting. And I got messaged just this morning by a good friend of mine who said she was planning to apply for the open call casting, and I was sure she was retired, and she insisted that she absolutely was. But as I say, you can never trust a pageant girl who says she's retired. Now, if you don't know, with Miss USA this year, coming up to its 75th anniversary, it's going to be held in August in Miami. I'm going to be there. If you're going to be there, let me know in the comments or send me a message. With the transition from the previous leadership still ongoing to Tom's leadership, Tom being Tom Brodeur, the new CEO, who I've interviewed now twice, there are some states that are understandably, I think, still in transition. I won't go into the politics of what's going on behind the scenes because, frankly, I don't know. So I'm not going to go into that. But open call is a way of saying those states that don't actually have directors and so they're not holding competition, rather than just having fewer contestants at Miss USA, open call is a way to get contestants to represent those states. Now, the representatives of those states or the representatives assigned to those states may not always be from those states, so the residency rules are, I was going to say considerably relaxed, but the residency rules always seem to be a bit lax to begin with. Let's say I never really could understand them, and Tom did say I think that they're going to be tightening those up starting from next year. But he also did mention, I think, that there was probably I think he said 5 or 6 states last year for Miss USA that actually had no applicants from in-state, which meant that they hadn't done the open call or the casting call. Those states wouldn't have been represented at Miss USA. So that's the casting process, or the open casting call, or the open call. I'm going to call it many different things, but you understand. Now, with it being announced 3 days ago, and I recommend you go to the Miss USA site or the Miss USA official social media, because that's really the only place where you'll get the up-to-date information, and information, frankly, that would be accurate and I would trust. But I'm looking over here. I just pulled a screenshot from the Miss USA website. These are the open call states. There's 16: Colorado, Georgia, Idaho, Kentucky, Michigan, Mississippi, Montana, New Hampshire, Ohio, Oregon, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, Texas, Vermont, Washington, and Wyoming. And again, if you need that list, go to the Miss USA site or their social media. Now, that certainly has some rather large and well-known states on it. If you are asking me whether I feel that you should apply, and if you're someone who's thinking of applying, I think really my answer to 99% of you is going to be yes. And here's why I'll say yes, even if I don't know your specific situation. There are many, many different things you can discuss. I've seen many people asking, former state title holders, oh, do you think I should compete? Oh, but I'm too short, or I don't have this, I don't have that. At the end of the day, I think you just have to answer one very simple question, which is, what is the worst that could happen? What is the worst thing that could possibly happen? And I asked this of my teen contestant, and she said, well, nothing. And yeah, I mean, really nothing. Look, let's say you apply for the open casting call and you don't make it through the first round, and so you don't go anywhere. So, right, at least you tried. What happens if you make it through the first round and then you go through the second round and then you get eliminated? Well, still, at least you gave it a go. What happens if you make it all the way through and you get picked? I mean, then you're going to Miss USA and you're competing at the 75th anniversary. I mean, I don't think many of you would say no to an opportunity to compete on the Miss USA or the Miss Teen USA stage. Now, I think there is really only one exception that I can think of where maybe you wouldn't want to apply to the open call. And that is if specifically your dream is not so much to compete on the Miss USA stage, but maybe your dream is to win your state USA title. And it's not on the open call list, right? So let's say we'll take New York, for example. New York is not on the open call list. So let's say your actual dream, your actual vision that you've been dreaming of since you were a small girl was not to win Miss USA, was not to win Miss Universe, but it was to win Miss New York USA. Well, then this path that we're going down this year wouldn't allow for you to do that through the open casting process because New York is having a state pageant. It's not on the open call list. And so if you apply for open call, even if you get through, you wouldn't be able to represent New York. So there goes your dream. But here's the thing. I think most people, and again, I ask this of my client, most people's vision, if they're really, really honest, is not to actually represent their state or to win their state title. I think most people's vision is to win the national title or perhaps the international title. I mean, I even asked my client, who's a teen contestant, I asked her, what's the actual vision? Is it to win your state teen title? Is it to win Miss Teen USA? Or is it actually to win Miss USA or to win Miss Universe? And I ask this because normally when you have difficulty making a decision, what it really is values clarification, a values clarification process. And if you're having difficulty making a decision, it's normally because you're either unclear on your values or some of those values are coming into conflict. And the easiest way to make a decision is to think about, well, what's really the end goal here? What's the most important thing to me? Now, let me take the hardest example. I think in this case, at the moment anyway, will be Texas, because Texas is holding a pageant. But you'll notice that Texas was on the open call list. Now, there's some argument, furor going on between, I believe it's the director of Miss Texas USA and Tom. I don't know what's going on, and really I don't want to know what's going on. But I think this would be the most difficult situation to sort of work around. So let's say if you have competed at Miss Texas USA before, or Miss Teen Texas USA before, and you have a good working relationship with the current director, with the current directorship team, and then you're looking at the open call list and seeing Texas is there, you know that there's going to likely be some sort of problem, even if you won the Texas state title, which is probably one of the most competitive titles, let's be honest. If you won the Miss Texas USA title by going through the pageant, you may not get to represent Texas at the Miss USA stage. Now, I hope this whole situation gets resolved, but let's say it doesn't. And so you're thinking about, and I actually have a client who's competing in Miss Texas Teen USA. Now, if you were to ask me, should I compete in the open call? Again, it's going to come down to a values clarification. What's most important to you? If you believe that being loyal to the current state director is absolutely the most important thing to you, and on top of that, you believe that the only way to remain loyal to that director is to not go through the open call process, then I know what you're going to choose, obviously, okay? If, on the other hand, you weren't planning on competing at Miss Texas USA, or maybe you competed before and you had a great time, but you weren't particularly planning on going through the process again, and then you saw the state come up, and you have a dream of representing Texas USA, Texas on the Miss USA stage, then I think I probably know which way you're going to go as well. Okay, and here's what I will say. Worst case scenario, if you do apply to open call and you get through, and you somehow end up with the Texas title. So you're representing Texas at USA. And let's say you had or have a pre-existing relationship with the state director. You are now obviously sort of caught between the rock and the hard place. And my sympathies would go out to you. Now, first off, that's a ways down the road. Okay, you'd have to get through first, but it's possible. So here's what I would say. If I'm in that situation and if I happen to get through, I would immediately get on a phone call. Okay, not an email, not a DM. I would get on a phone call with the director, and more than likely I would get on a phone call with the person who won the Miss Texas USA pageant and have a discussion. And hopefully that discussion can be civil. I really believe that's the only way that we can resolve situations like this is by having discussions. Even if they get a bit heated, even if you don't necessarily agree at the end, I think that's the only way forward. And I'd like to think if you pick up the phone and say, hey, I wouldn't say hope there's no hard feelings because that sounds like speaking to a 5-year-old. But if you explain the process and you try to reach out and rebuild that bridge or build that bridge, so to speak, I think that will go a long way. Yes, of course, you're going to have people in the comments saying, oh, she's not our real Miss Texas, blah-de-blah-de-blah. I don't really care so much what people think, and I'd encourage you to be like that too. I would say focus more on what you think about yourself and what those people closest to you think about yourself. And when it comes to what do you think about yourself, again, it's values clarification. What is it that you really want? What is your dream? I mean, I think loyalty and honesty are absolutely amazing values. They are. That being said, you never know what's going on behind the scenes, especially in pageants, unless you are actually there. And I've grown pretty wary of taking anyone's sort of account of what happened as gospel, because my experience has been, even if someone tries to tell the objective truth, if you have two people in the exact same situation having the exact same experience, and then you ask them afterwards to tell you exactly what happened, they're going to come up with completely different accounts. And I think there was a study with this where it may not have been a formal study, but people, when they ask, for example, at a severe car accident, to recount the details of what happened, and you ask two people who are involved in the same accident what happened, they sometimes come up with wildly varying accounts. And it's not like a lot of time passed, and so their memories have been warped. It's just that we remember what we remember, and there's so much that us humans don't notice. We're basically filtering machines. We don't notice everything that's going on around us. Otherwise, we'd go completely crazy. And so I really think the only genuinely tricky situation will be Texas, and I really hope that gets resolved. But as I said, if you go through open call and if you end up with a Texas state title, and you have that pre-existing relationship with the current directorship of Miss Texas USA, I would reach out and hope that there's a discussion that can be had. If you go through the Miss Texas pageant at the moment, the Miss Texas USA pageant, and you win, I don't really know what's going to happen. I mean, you tell me, who knows? Unless something changes, you're not going to be going to Miss USA. I can't see that you'd be offered an open title. That just doesn't make any sense. And so what I think, if you're competing in that situation, you could line up to compete at the Miss Texas USA pageant if you wanted. Maybe you look at it as practice, or maybe you do it as a sign of good faith, and you could do the open call. What I will say is work out, as I said, not just what's the worst thing that could happen, but work out what the different outcomes possible could be. And there really aren't that many. And then also think about how likely it is that each outcome is going to happen. So for example, you think you're going to go through open call and you're going to win the Miss Texas USA state through open call, and then now you're worried about what's going to happen. People in Texas are going to say you're a fraud, you didn't really win it. That's not something to be worried about now, really. Let's be honest. That's really a problem for future you. And I think it's only worth worrying about if and when it happens. Right now, my message to, I think, 95% of you is going to be, as I said, what's the absolute worst thing that could happen? I think for most of you, not all of you, but the vast majority of you, your big dream is to get onto the Miss USA or the Miss Teen USA stage. I'm not even sure if it's Miss Universe. I think for a lot of you, it might be Miss USA specifically. If it's Miss Universe, great. If your dream, if what you've been working towards has been getting onto that Miss USA stage or the Miss Teen USA stage, it really is only logical that you want to give yourself as many attempts as possible, as many at-bats as possible to get there, because there's nothing that's certain or given in life in general, but certainly in pageantry. And so, again, example with my client, she was saying, well, I'm thinking of competing next year instead, because then there will be, a state pageant. And because what had happened, she had won let's call it a prelim. And because she had won a prelim, the way it goes, they pay her entry to the state pageant. And so she had won the prelim. And so obviously she was assuming that she was going to get free entry to the state pageant, and that hasn't worked out, right? But here's the thing. Again, what's your outcome? Is your outcome to get that free entry to the state pageant? Or is your outcome to be on the Miss Teen USA stage or the Miss USA stage? I absolutely get and understand that it's disappointing that you won. Here's the thing that I will say. A lot of us in life get unhinged, come unstuck. I shouldn't say unhinged, come unstuck, because we have a blueprint in our head of the way we think things should be, a blueprint. And so, for example, your blueprint in life might be by the age of 30, you'll be a multimillionaire, you'll be married, you'll have a Malibu mansion, you'll have 2.5 kids, you'll have a Pomeranian, you'll have a giant ranch somewhere else, and you're going to spend 3 months of the year traveling through Europe or backpack. I don't know. Okay, that might be your blueprint. Now, if that really is your blueprint, the other side to this is, well, what's actually happened, which we call your life conditions, right? And so maybe that was your blueprint, but your life conditions are, you're 30, you're broke, you're single, you hate your job, it's a dead-end job, you never get to travel. You see what I mean? And a lot of the time, if you're feeling unhappy or unfulfilled on an ongoing basis, it really comes down to the simple equation of, do your life conditions match your blueprint? Do your life conditions match your blueprint? If they don't, you're going to feel unsettled, at least, deeply depressed at worst. And if that's happening to you, well, you look at it, you have a choice. You either change the life conditions or you change the blueprint. Now, if your blueprint was that I'm going to win the local prelim pageant, then I'll win my state pageant, then I'll represent my state on the Miss Teen USA stage, but that blueprint has been screwed up because now there is no state director, and so there is no state pageant, and there's only open casting call. Your blueprint has been messed up. And so you're unhappy. My client's unhappy. But here's the thing. You can't change the conditions, right? Because those conditions aren't set by you, right? So as much as you won the local prelim and you thought things should work out a certain way, it's not going to happen. You can't change the life conditions. So the only thing that she can do, my client can do, is to change her blueprint or to change her expectations as to the way things should be. And so, maybe she should have won the local prelim, then won state, then gone on to nationals. But that's living in fantasy land, at least for this year. And let's be honest, maybe next year, you don't know that there will be a director who takes it on. And maybe you don't know that the director who's coming on will honor the pre-existing relationship with a prelim. Maybe there'll be a giant falling out. And so you're putting off, if she doesn't compete, she's putting off for a year a chance at achieving her dream. And there's no guarantee, in my mind anyway, that next year it will be better. I feel it would be a missed opportunity. And so just be aware of that. Because in pageantry, we tend to have a lot of these blueprints as to how things should be. Pageant fans have them too as well. Some of them are reasonable. you would expect that the person who represents Texas on the Miss USA stage would come from Texas. I think that's reasonable. But sometimes life conditions, it's just not working out that way for whatever reason. And so is it better that no one represents the state or that someone does get to represent the state? Look, that's up to you and that's your judgment call. I think for Miss USA, it's good to have more people involved within reason than having, only, half the stage empty, for example. But that's not my point. My point is sometimes we can't change the hand that life has dealt us, right? We get dealt the hand we're dealt, sometimes at birth, sometimes with our parents, sometimes with our partner, sometimes with our career, whatever it is. If we can't change those life conditions, the only thing that we can change is our blueprint, which again is our expectations of how things should be. And so again, I'm going to ask you, if you ask me, should I apply for open call? I'm going to say, well, what's the worst thing that could happen? I would also ask you, well, what's your actual goal here? What's the actual outcome? And if you want to compete on that Miss USA stage and you're not from Texas, okay, or you are you're not from one of the states that's on open call. So let's say there is, again using New York as an example, right? There is a state pageant for New York. And so if you want to compete for New York on the Miss USA stage, you're going to have to go to the pageant, not go through open call. But barring I don't want to call them fringe cases because, again, Texas is one of the biggest states. But barring those cases, absolutely go for it. I mean, the submission requirements I'm not 100% sure that this is accurate. This is my read on it. So again, check the Miss USA website and socials. But when you apply, I believe there's an application fee, which is reasonable, because otherwise you get everyone just entering because it's free, not because they actually want it. But putting that to one side, the first thing is a headshot. I mean, guys, all of you have headshots, right? Whenever I set up my interviews, one of the things I ask for is a headshot. Everyone has headshots. In fact, normally the response is, oh, I've got new upcoming headshots in 2 weeks. Can I send those to you? I'm like, yeah, fine, like whatever. You have no shortage of headshots, so you're squared away, right? I'm sure there will be some paperwork of some sort. You can do that, okay? It's not like it's hard, right? Like it's hard? No, it's not. Then, if you get through that first stage, now again, if my read is correct, if you get through that first stage, and I believe there's a public vote, I'm not exactly sure how it's going to work out. I think the details are to come. But if you get through that round, very quickly, I would say though, not the next round being months away, but very quickly you would be expected to provide 2 videos. One is basically your direct to camera telling a bit about yourself, why you want to compete at Miss USA, and it's to be 45 to 60 seconds. Another video basically is to show your walking expertise. So whether it's modeling on a runway somewhere or even if it's video footage of you walking at home, those are the 2 video submissions. Now, if you are considering doing open casting call and you submit, yes, you have the headshot and you would have to wait to see if you submit the videos, but I wouldn't wait, if that makes sense, because it's going to happen very quickly. They did say first round of open call, it's happening in May, which is now, and it's already 19th of May. And they said first round of winners will be announced in June. And remember, the pageant itself is in August. So it would behoove you to get a move on, right? Get a move on with doing that video, the direct-to-camera piece about yourself. And you could use B-roll. I will create a separate video about my recommendations for making that video stand out. I will say Tom very much said in our interview, don't do Hollywood production level things, right? He wants real. He wants presentable but real. So not, the whole Hollywood Michael Bay production thing going on. Don't do that. I saw some people do that last year with Miss USA and it really backfired spectacularly. So don't do that. The second video, you do it as please. If you have video footage from you on a runway, then you're set, okay? But get moving on that because it'll be required sooner rather than later, and I don't think you want to be in a rush. The other thing I would say, if you really are going to do this and your dream is to represent, to be on the Miss USA stage, it's only 3 months away, guys. You need to be preparing like you're going to be on that national stage now. I'm talking about physically with your walks, with your wardrobe. Costumes is a different thing because you'd have to find out what state you're going to represent. but you don't have an abundance of time. It's 3 months away. And so this open casting call, the time from open casting call to you posting your submission to maybe getting accepted and then to actually being on the Miss USA stage, it's just over 3 months as we speak. It's 19th of May now, and the pageant is happening 20th something of August. And so you need to start prepping now with the assumption that you're going to get through. Doesn't mean you need to take on 5,000 trainers and start spending tens of thousands of dollars on gowns and coaching, but you need to start getting ready now. Okay? And look, for many of you, the best part about pageants is it gives you a direction in your life. There's something definite at a certain point that you have to be ready for. And a lot of you struggle, frankly, when you don't have that in your life. So, start preparing like you're going to be on that stage at the end of August. And, if everything goes your way, great. If not, I don't think you would have lost anything, because at least you gave it a go. And again, that's why I started this whole video on, well, what's the worst thing that can happen? I mean, I don't even think the worst thing that could happen is that you don't get through. I mean, really, the worst thing that could happen is if you get it, maybe not the worst thing, but let's say you do get offered it and then you don't want it, you can turn it down. I wouldn't advise that necessarily, but you could do that, right? But there are a lot of these issues that some of you are worrying about. I'm seeing a lot of you excited and thinking about doing open call, but then you're already talking yourself out of it. I'm kind of viewing this was maybe like a once in a lifetime opportunity. And by the way, yes, there will be some stigma around open call applicants. I don't like using the word stigma because I think it's overused, but in this case, yes, there's always going to be people who go, oh, well, she didn't actually compete in an actual pageant. Oh, she's not from that state. She's one of those people. Guys, I don't care, right? Again, it comes from, at this point in my journey, it comes from, I know what I put in, I know what I stand for, I know what I bring to the table. And maybe you're not quite there yet, and I'm not saying I'm perfect at this, but over the years, I've gotten a lot better at understanding, look, I know what I bring to the table, and I know I'm not everyone's cup of tea. If you approach this situation from that perspective, if you know what your dream is, who cares what the general public says, okay? There's this old saying, or maybe it's a newer saying, I don't know, but haters never talk about people who are below them, right? If you're trash talking someone, you're never talking about someone who you think is below you. We only trash talk people who we believe are above us, and I think it's a sign of envy. I don't want to say above us; that's an ugly word, but you get what I mean. If they're trash talking you, they're at home doing nothing whilst you're up on stage living your dream. I mean, you tell me, which position would you rather be in? Living your dream on the Miss USA stage or the Miss Universe stage and dealing with a couple of people who are saying negative things on social media, or would you rather be the person at home doing nothing? And also, by the way, even if you go through all the normal channels or going through a state pageant and then winning and then representing, you're still going to have people who say horrible things about you, because that's the world that we live in. So if you're worried at all that, oh, people will say this or people might think that, just stop. Okay? Don't live a life based on what other people think. Get clear in your head as to, again, what is your goal? And I know many of you, the goal is to compete on the Miss USA stage. Not the Miss Universe stage, the Miss USA stage. And so if you're going to ask me, do I think that whether you should apply for open casting call? Yes. Yeah, I cannot think of many people where I would even hesitate to say yes. Because again, what's the worst case scenario that could come up? I can't really think of a bad one. I think Texas is the main case. And so if you're from Texas and you want me to have a chat with you, let me know. But even there's issues that will come up, and we can work around anything. Okay, it's not that complicated. And again, aside from that, if your dream really was to compete for, I don't know, win your state pageant, then maybe there's a different discussion there. But I don't think there are many of you whose dream it would be to win the state pageant more so than the national pageant. If it is, that's great. I'm not disrespecting that, because I know that a lot of your states, or all your states, have their own proud identities. But remember what I said about blueprint. Okay, we may have our blueprint as to how things should be, but the world's changing, and we don't have much control sometimes over what's happening, those life conditions. And sometimes life just deals you a crappy hand, and you can't change them. You can't change those life conditions as much as you'd like, so you have to change your blueprint. You have to change your expectations. You have to adapt to the realities of the situation, not wait for things to work out perfectly one day, Sunday. Because, if you do that, my fear is that next year, again, it doesn't work out. And then next year again, it doesn't work out. And if you're competing for the teens, well, you're going to age out, right? And you say, oh, but my dream was to compete for Miss anyway. Yeah, but if you competed for the teen title, that would have had more at-bats. You would have had more practice. I think that's only a good thing, not a bad thing. So I know this won't apply to all of you. I probably should have said that at the beginning, but it's going to apply to a lot of you who are in the US anyway, and you're thinking of applying for open casting call. And look, it's going to apply to a lot of you when you think about entering a pageant point blank. What have you got to lose? Okay, if you're sitting on the fence and you haven't competed in your first one and you want to, and you've done your research and you picked your pageant and you're just sitting on that fence, just pull the trigger, right? Hit submit, do the thing, and then I think it'd be better that you've done it and then you go, wow, okay, I did it, didn't like it, it's not for me. You'll sleep much better at night with that certainty than, I wonder what would have happened if only. That sentence never ends well. That sentence keeps you up at night. That's what leads to regret. So 99% of you, yes, apply. If you make it through, I'll see you there in August.